Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the Stamping Bella image called Curvy Girl Loves to Hike. Because there's a lot of colouring in both the background and the image, I didn't worry about showing the stamping of this card. I basically just centered her in the middle of my card base so that I could build the trees and ground and path around her. So let's get started with the colouring because there's quite a bit of it. I just stamped my image out with some Memento Tuxedo black ink onto some Copic XPress at Cardstock and just die cut it out with a plain rectangle die. As I was going to be colouring up the entire background, I just thought it'd be easier to just have a plain rectangle die for the background. Now I've just used my lightest colour that I'll be using for my path just to set out where I'm wanting that to go because I wanted to colour in this background and I didn't want any green to be where my path is going because it will be a bit lighter than my background. I just wanted it to look like she's really deep in the forest, so that's why I'm going to be colouring everything green. It's like I'm not sure when you've gone hiking that you've just noticed when you're very deep into the forest just how dark it can get. Now because this is a light green and I'm going to be colouring up those leaves green, I've just gone straight over the top of that with my green marker because I will be able to add the extra greens that I'm wanting for those leaves when I do my colouring of my image. Now to get like a nice smooth blend between these colors, you can see that I'm holding my pen quite far back and I'm just kind of using the side of my marker to get some nice, clean strokes. And I'm just going over those colors with the other colors, just trying to get a nice smooth blend. So I'm just working with that side of that marker. As you can see now, I'm just going to bring that lighter color back in again and just fill over all of that green space. I'm just kind of going to where I believe will be like the ground, and then we can set the ground out later on. Now again with the light marker, because I'm not like the best at drawing things, I always like to go kind of in with a light marker or a pencil to set out where I'm wanting my images to be. So I'm kind of drawing a tree just in a very light brown marker to kind of match in with the other brown markers that I'll be using for these trees. So I'm just going to set a couple of bigger ones beside her and then a couple of smaller ones kind of just off in the distance behind her. And I'm just going straight over the top of that green because I'm going to be using quite dark brown markers for my trees. So I'm just slowly building up with my colours. The ones a little bit further back will be a bit lighter because they're obviously a little bit further from our view, but all the ones that are at the front are going to be quite dark. So I've decided to go in now with my darkest marker, just set out some kind of, a darker shade at the very side where it'll be kind of in a bit more darkness, and then a few little kind of patches of where kind of like the timber grows up and makes it look, try and make it look rough. So my darkest marker I'll be using today is E49. Now I'm going in with my second darkest color, which is my E57. And I'm just expanding out where those shadows will be, and then just also widening where those like kind of bark stripes will be. Now I did forget to mark out my little tree branch that's growing off the side of this tree. So I'm just going over with those same colors again. And then I also wanted to kind of just make these a little bit lighter. So I'm not using the E49 in those back trees, but all the other colors I'll be using in the trees at the back. So, because they're still quite close to her, but they are just that little bit further back than these two that she's standing right beside. So again, I'm just working out with the E44 to blend out that E57. And it doesn't need to be really smooth because obviously the trees are quite rough. So we're kind of wanting to keep that kind of rough look. So I'm going to go over and just re-establish all those kind of like little, tree like lines and ridges with my darker marker again. And I'm also setting some shadows in the base of that tree as well, where it's kind of going to be up against the grass. Now, once we've got that done with the darkest color, the E49, I'm going to blend that out again quite roughly with our E57, just kind of drawing those lines out. And we'll do the same with this side tree, just blending that shadow out, blending where those shadows are inside those little kind of grooves that come up at the base of the tree, not forgetting about those ones at the back. So now we'll go out with the E44 to keep blending out that brown color of the E57 and E49. Just kind of working like little flicking motions to get that, but to keep that kind of rough look. And we'll go over everything with the E55 just to make sure they've got that fully covered, because obviously we did have that green in the background. So now I'm just going to fill in our little path. So I thought it was easier to put the grass in the background in first because of, the trees are a little bit darker and I can go over the top of the green markers, and it's just easier to get an even coverage and a smooth coverage of the background with the green markers rather than having to go around trees and things like that. But if you wanted to do the grass later and put your trees and everything in first, that's fine to do that. And as you can see, I did do my background coloring before I did my image coloring. So that's mainly because I'm most probably more confident on coloring images than I am backgrounds. So rather than spend like a lot of time coloring up a background, coloring up an image and then do the background and not do it the way I want, I rather do the background first, make sure I've got that right, because I feel a bit more confident coloring my image. But again, you can do it whatever way you feel most comfortable with. Now I'm just setting some shadows and some kind of undulations in our path, just using some different brown markers to our tree. So I kind of set it out with the lightest color first, then went in with the darkest, which my darkest color will be my E44. I blended that out with my E42. And now the other markers I'm using is E33 and E31 is my lightest color. So I'm just blending that out until we've got a nice smooth blend. And then I'm going to just reinforce that because it did kind of get a little bit washed out when I was doing my final color with all my colors. So I'm just going to bring that E44 back in just to re-establish those shadows. Blend that out with the E42, just slowly working into that lighter color of the E31. And then we'll bring in our E33, which is called Sand, and just blend that out. So it does kind of give it a nice kind of reddy tinge to it, I find, with that sand. And then we'll do our final blend out with our E31 so that we've got a nice kind of smooth look to our path. And then I do want to add some little bits of interest into our path. So I'm just going to grab my darkest colors. So I'm going to grab my E44 and just staple in, so like there's little rocks and bits of dirt and things like that. So in the darkest areas, I'm using that E44. And just in those dark areas going into the light areas, I'm just adding the E33 just to add that little bit of interest. Now I just want to add all my kind of grass imagery down at the bottom. So because I've already laid in my lightest color, the YG01, I'm now going in with my darkest color for the grass, and which was also the color that I used for the top of the background, so like kind of where it goes up into the canopy. So my G96, blending that out with the G24 because I want the grass to look quite dark, being that she's well into the forest. Blend that out with my G43. Just kind of working little flicking motions just to kind of create some interest in our ground. So it's quite like patchy grass. And then we'll go in with the YG01 again to blend that out. So just kind of going out around those colors, just filling everything in and just making sure we've got kind of smooth blends where that grass flicks out. Now, just to add a few more kind of bits of interest to our grass, I'm just using BG99 just to add some little kind of flicks of grass that are going to be growing up, kind of at the front of our scene and then also around the trees and the grass that's growing at the back. So I'll add some around these trees at the back, and then also just kind of in those little dark areas, but making sure we've got a few around that are going to show up closer to where we're actually looking as the viewer. So now that the background's finished, I'm going to start colouring the main character, so our little hiking girl from Stamping Bella. So I've just gone in with my lightest marker just to work out where I'm wanting to put all my shadows. And now I'm going to add my darkest marker, which will be my E04 today. So you will note that I have all the colours just kind of up in the top left hand corner, but I will have them all listed in the description box below. And there, as of today, there's going to be quite a lot of them for this tutorial with that background included. So now I'm just blending that E04 out with the E11. So obviously she'll have some shadows thrown by her shorts, obviously where that leg comes out. Her hair will throw a bit of shadow, as will her shirt. So now we're going to blend that out with the E01 and go back to our lightest marker again, the E00, to blend out that skin colour. Now just to add a little bit of rosy cheeks, because obviously she's doing a little bit of exertion, and if you're anything like me, I get very red in the face when I exert myself. So I've just popped a little bit of red kind of onto those cheeks, just under the eyes. And you just blend that out with the E00 marker into that lighter colour space. So again, with the hair, I've gone in with the lightest colour to work out where all my shadows will be. And now just using little flicking motions, I'm just going through the colours, going up to where our highlights will be. And then we'll go in with our lightest colour again, the Y32, to fully go over that. And just, I always like normally with hair, just to give it a second coat, just to make sure we retain all those little flicking hair look, hair-like pieces of the hair. So I'm going through my colours again and just finalising that onto the shiny part, which will be her main hair. Now we'll fill in her little tank top. I'm just going a plain black one. I'm going to use the same markers for her tank as I am for her little roll that she'll be sleeping on once she sets up camp. So with the lightest marker, the N4, I've just added in all the shadow areas. Now I'm going in with our darkest marker for where it will be thrown the shadow from her actual pack, and then obviously from her shoulder and head as well. Blend that out with the N6, just working up into that white space, which will be our highlight when we put our N4 in. So just flicking that up so we've got a nice smooth blend between the colours. Now her pack, I'm going to go in again with the lightest colour. I'm going to be using the YG markers, starting with our lightest colour, which is the YG93, to work out our shadows. And then I'll come in with the darkest marker, YG99. So I'm going very traditional with her pack, kind of very army, ex-army look that she's got from the store. And we're going to blend that out with the YG97, just flicking out to get a nice smooth blend to where our highlight will be, where the sun will be, or the light will be reflecting it. She's not getting much sun in there. Then we'll go in with the YG95 to blend that out, and we'll come back in with our lightest colour again, the YG93, to finish off our full blend. Now that that's done, I'll just make her cup. So I'm wanting this to look quite shiny, so I'm just using my T markers and just slowly working into that light space, but leaving some space there. And I did realize I missed putting some grass in at the back. Now I'm just going to make her look like she's just got some denim shorts on. So I'm just using my B markers from the darkest B97 to B95. Blend that out with 93, and then we finish off with the lightest marker, 91. Now I'm giving her a nice red shirt, which I thought will match really nicely with all that green in the background and make sure that she stands out. So I put in my lightest colour first, and then my darkest colour for my shadows is going to be E29. So obviously around where that pack is, she'll be a little bit in shadow. And obviously at the base of her arms, we'll blend that out with the R89. And then come in with the R59 to blend that out, because it's going to be a kind of nice, kind of reddy maroon shirt that she's got on. Blend that out with the R46, and then we'll go back in with our lightest colour that we started with. I'm not going to fully complete it, because I do still want to make sure we retain that highlight. So you can see that I will leave a little bit in the middle, and I'm just going to go through that color again to make sure we've got a nice smooth blend with this shirt. So I'm going back in with the E29 just to reaffirm those shadows, blend that out with the R89, making sure just flicking up so that we get a nice blend with the R59 next. And then we'll bring that R46 back in. Just flick down. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of tip to tip. There's a little bit of space between the R46 and the R43. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tip to tip and then fill that in with the rest of the R43. So we've got, make sure that we've got a nice highlight there. You can just see how well that blends out. Now we'll finish off with her boots. Just using some E markers, E39, E37, and finishing off with E35. Now I thought I just wanted a bit more shadow there, so I'm just going to bring that E29 in to just add a little bit more shadow there, then re-add the E39, E37, and do that final blend out with the E35. It won't be too shiny because obviously these are leather boots. And then I'm just going to use our E49, the same as our trees, just to finish off that base of the boot, and just use the same red markers to have her having matching socks. So now I'm just going over again with those the darker green markers so that you can see the leaves that are coming off her backpack. And then we'll just add a little bit of color to those two flowers that are there. I'm just kind of going a bit of orange and a bit of yellow for some nice kind of freshness. And now the final thing is adding our colouring to our stick. So I'm just going to have it, because it's kind of faced away from her, I'm going to have the shadow on the left hand side. So blend that out with the E55 and then finally with the E53. Now I've grabbed out my Misty, and I thought this one, You're Going Places, from this Lawn Fawn stamp set was perfect for this card. So I've grabbed some black cardstock and I'm just going to attach that and add a little bit of anti-static powder tool to prep that to help stop any powder going where we don't want it. With my Versa watermark ink, I've given that a stamp, and one seemed to be perfect. So I've grabbed my Stempendous white embossing powder, given that a couple of sprinkles. Now there were a few little stray bits, so I've just grabbed my kind of angled brush, and I'm just going to flick around there just to make sure there's no stray particles to kind of ruin our beautiful embossing. So now I've preheated my heat tool, gone into the back first and then go to the front until it's nice and melted. I've pre-cut and scored a green card base. I thought this would go really well with our image in the background to make it very outdoorsy looking. So I've added that to the front, and now that our sentiment's dry, I'm just going to remove any excess powder from our anti-static powder tool with the cloth. And this sentiment strip die is just a little bit bigger than what I'm wanting, so I've added it to one end, and now I'm just going to kind of lock it into place, and you want it to be the same length as it is the other end. Add that purple tape and run that through my die cutting machine, and now we've got our little perfect size sentiment strip. Now, as everything else is flat on the card, because I've added that straight to the card base, I'm going to add some black foam squares so that they'll hide behind this black strip. And I've removed all the release paper, and just using my tweezers, I'm just going to line that up with the edge of the actual image panel, making sure that's nice and straight, and give that a good press. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. I absolutely love Curvy Girl Loves to Hike. She's just so gorgeous, and I loved creating this forest background for her to hike through, and I just loved adding that really kind of bright heat embossed sentiment just to make that pop. And I think she pops really well with that red shirt on amongst all the green grass and the brown trees. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.